Hi, biology. This is Miss Satterley. I'm going to talk about probability today, and then there's an assignment that you guys will do after you watch the video. So, probability, we're going to apply probability to genetics problems. So, we've already done Punnett squares and how to calculate things with it, but now we're going to put different genetics problems into math problems, basically. So again, we have our Punnett square here. Just to have a review, you put your first parent on the top and your second parent down the side. That's how I like to do it. You bring it down and over. And since I'm crossing two homozygous, all of my offspring are going to be the same. In this case, they're all heterozygotes. So I'm going to write a word problem, or the parents out. So I'm crossing big B, little b. All of my offspring in this case are going to be big B, little b. So we're going to do probability for this. So probability is going to be when you take your parents and you figure out, can you get the offspring that is being asked for? So when you do probability, you're going to have a fraction like this. It's going to be your desired variable over how many possible variables that we can have. Well, we're just using alleles here. So I'm going to go and start off with a base of what you're going to see for this. So again, I can have either a homodominant, a homorecessive, or a homorecessive. For my desired, I'm going to use the big B. So the big B is what I want to have out of these problems. And then we're going to have over possible. I'm going to do possible first. Possible is what I could possibly get from my problem. How many options do I have here? Well, this first one, I have a big B and I have a big B. They're the same, which means I only can get a big B. So my number, my possible would be 1. Now, let's go over here. Big B, little b. Well, I can either get a big B or a little b. So I have two different outcomes. So two possible outcomes would be a 2. And then over here, I either have a little b or a little b. So again, my possible outcomes is only 1 because I only can get a little b. To do desired, you have to know what you're looking for. So in this case, here's my desired allele. I want a big B. Well, it's here, but it is missing from this one. So my desired, if my desired shows up, I put a 1. If my desired is missing, it's a 0. This top box here is either going to be 0 or 1. It's not going to be 2 or anything else. It's 0 or 1. Your bottom number is either going to be 1 or 2, which means you either have one letter or you have 2. So again, this is what we could have, 0 or 1, 1 or 2. So this is how you set up your desired over possible probability. So again, this right here, the probability desired over possible. So these are desired, these are possible. Now we're going to apply this to actual problems. There are two rules that we're going to follow, the rule of multiplication and the rule of addition. Now, the rule of multiplication is the one that we'll usually go by. And I'll show you an example when we're going to do the rule of addition. So the rule of multiplication is we're going to multiply our problems here. So here are some examples. So in rabbits, the allele for B for black hair is dominant over the allele little b for brown hair. You can practice using probabilities to predict the outcome. So we're going to read this first part. Calculate the probability of a homozygous dominant offspring resulting from a cross between two heterozygous parents. You have to read these. Homozygous dominant and two heterozygous parents. I'm first going to write my parents out. So I have big B little b times big B little b. So that is the first part. Big B little b times big B little b. 2 heterozygous. Remember, hetero means different, homo means same. My offspring that I want is a homodominant, which I've given here. So that's 2 big B's. Now I'm going to do my math. I'm going to go ahead and write my fractions here. Again, we are going to have our desired over our possible. I'm going to go ahead and do the possible first. So looking at this, how many possible options we have? Well, I can either get a big B or a little b, which means that's 2. Big B, little b, which is 2. And this over here is going to multiply out. So 2 times 2 is 4. Now let's do the top. We are looking for big B and big B. So this big B is going to come from this parent. And this big B is going to come from this parent. So since they are present or there, I'm going to have a 1 and a 1. And 1 times 1 is 1. So our percentage is going to be 1 over 4th or 25%. Now I'm going to do my Punnett square here to show that I'll get the same answer. The Punnett square is just shown here to make sure I'm checking myself with it. Okay, so here is my desired right there, and it's 1 out of 4. Now we're just putting math problems to this. Let's do number 2. Calculate the probability of a heterozygous offspring So a heterozygous offspring resulting from a cross between a heterozygous parent and a homorecessive parent. I'm going to write my parents. So I have a heterozygous parent and a homorecessive. And I want to get a heterozygous offspring, which is big B, little b. Write out my fraction. I'm going to do my possible first, just so we have this visible on the screen again. Desired over possible. Okay. Possible. I can either get a big B or a little b, so my possible is 2. Here, it's either little b or little b, so I only have one option, so it's going to be 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. At the top, we're going to separate it where this one goes to this parent, and this one goes to this parent. So my possible is here, so it's 1 over 2. My possible is also here, so it's 1 over 1. 1 over 1, which is going to be 50%. Now, just to make sure, I did this properly. Let's fill in our Punnett square. I did my parents backwards on accident. Okay. Here's my desired. 1, 2. That's 1/2. Calculate the probability of a homozygous dominant offspring resulting from a cross between a heterozygous parent and a homorecessive parent. So again, my offspring and then my two parents, heterozygous and homozygous recessive. Hetero means different, so big B, little b times homorecessive. Homo same, recessive is always 2 little letters. And then I want to get a homozygous dominant. Okay, I'm going to write out my fractions. So I need my desired over possible. So we have possible can either be big B or little b. So it'll be a 2. Possible, a little b, so it's 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. Now we need to do the top. Well, I have a big B. So my desired is here, so that'll be 1. But my desired is missing, so that's a 0. So 1 times 0 is 0, so that's a 0%. Fill in our Punnett square. And you can see that since my one parent doesn't have big letter, big B is missing. Cannot happen, so it's 0%. Okay, now we're going to do number 3. We're going to calculate the probability of a heterozygous offspring resulting from a cross between a homozygous dominant and a homozygous recessive parent. Write out our problem. Homodominant, big B, times homorecessive, little b, and we want a heterozygote, big B, little b. I'm going to do our math here. My possible outcomes, well, I only can get big B, so that's 1. I only can get big B again, so that's 1. So 1 times 1 is 1. And then this one right here, big B, we can get it there. Little b, we can get it there, which means that my desired is present in both. So 1/1, and that's 1. And I'm going to end up with 100%. And if I do my Punnett square, I'll just do it down here just to show it. I did do this earlier. All of my offspring are going to be heterozygous. Those are problems using the rule of multiplication where you just multiply the outcome. Sometimes you're going to have problems that aren't going to be nice and neat like that. If you run into this problem, two heterozygotes giving you a heterozygote. Well, I know that's 50% if I do my Punnett square. Okay, so here's my Punnett square. Here they are. But how do I show that mathematically? Well, let's do our problem. So I'm going to have 2 for both because they both can be big B, little b. So 2 times 2 is 4. And my desired, well, that can come from there, and that can come from there, so 1/1. But that's only 1/4. That's not 50%. Well, the reason for this is is you actually can have this combined two ways. So our first parent here, our first combination, we can have a big B from that combination, or my desired is also here, which means it can be flip-flopped. So it's not just 1/2 times 1/2 equals 1/4. You actually have to do this twice because it combines two different ways, which is where you get 50%, because you take your first combination and add it to your second combination, which gives you 2/4, which is 1/2. I'm going to rewrite this using colors to try to explain it differently. I can get two combinations. I can get the big B from the first parent and the little b from the second parent, or I can get the little b from the second parent and the first parent, and the big B from the second, which you would just rearrange that, which would be. So because I can get that combination twice, I take what I have mathematically done and we add them together. So because it can happen this way and this way, we're going to add them. And that is how you get your 1/2 or 50%. This is probability. And this is going to be the framework that you're going to start with. There are several practice problems that I want you to do, and they're on the Google Docs. So that is the end for probability. I went over the rule of multiplication, which is the one that we'll usually use, and also showed you the rule of addition, and that had to do with it recombining two different ways. So that's how we get the 50% for two heterozygotes making a heterozygote. Most of the time, you're going to just use the rule of multiplication, which will be your desired over possible. Remember these combinations here. So your possible is either 1 or 2, and your desired will either be 1 or 0, depending on whether or not that allele is present. There are 8 practice problems that you need to do. If you have questions, please let me know, and I will do what I can to try to explain it differently or to give you some extra help. Again, have a wonderful day. Bye.